This is definitely one of my most anticipated game of this year, and despite the Epic Games Store hoopla, I'm still buying this game to support the developers, and just despite Bethesda for every BS practice that they've done to any of their franchises. And now that I finished the game, what are my thoughts on Obsidian's first-person shooter RPG? Welcome to appabend's Uncapped, a series of reviews by yours truly. Today's review is gonna be on The Outer Worlds, the first-person RPG made by Obsidian as a middle finger to Fallout's current antics. But before we get to the review, YouTube might potentially demonetize this video, so if you'd like to support my work, you can do so by checking the links down below. The Outer Worlds is the story of Yu, who was one of the very few people from the time long past that got put in suspended animation, but then you get revived by a doctor named Phineas. The doctor has plans to save the world by reviving other colonists, but before that, you're gonna have to figure out how to get through the world. Subsequently, you'll end up having your own ship called the Unreliable, and with the ship, you're also gonna be able to hire crew members and companions that will help you along the way. Hell, you might be able to find other means of saving the world in case you think the doctor is a bit of a nutter. It's up to you to figure out how to save the galaxy and fix its concurrent problems. There's a reason why this is one of my most anticipated game of this year, and it's not just because it's an alternative to Bethesda's post-apocalyptic RPG franchise that constantly dwindles into the trash bin. It's because it's made by Obsidian, the one game developer that took Bethesda's IP, made Fallout New Vegas, and screamed at Bethesda saying, "Guys, this is how you should make a Fallout game." Obsidian made the 3D Fallout experience compelling with its stellar quest designs and an even better degree of freedom in who you want to roleplay as. None of the factions in the game are truly good. All of them have their own means of achieving their goals, and some of which are much worse than others. It's just a matter of your character's morality and who you're roleplaying as. So it's no surprise that as someone who really likes Fallout New Vegas, that I want to see what they're doing with The Outer Worlds. No longer constrained and screwed by Bethesda, they finally have all the time in the world to develop that post-apocalyptic game that they wanted. Now that I finished the game, what are my thoughts on it? To save you guys a little bit of time, The Outer Worlds is fine. It's not amazing, it's not horrible, it's just fine. It has tons of flaws, but tons of strengths as well, which is why this review exists, so we can talk about them. This game combines elements from a lot of Western RPGs, and the good elements I might add. Let's start off with the world exploration, which is very cleverly designed. While the game isn't entirely open world, it is definitely non-linear. The city hubs are filled with shops, restricted areas that you can get through with the use of disguises, and secret routes that give loots and valuables. It reminds me so much of the way Deus Ex did their level design, especially the Adam Jensen series. There are twists and turns that I didn't see the first time, and even some minor platforming sessions to reach certain places with loots. If you're in an open area, the game feels like a Fallout game, although in a significantly smaller scale, which is perfectly fine for me because that means that you're able to explore a lot of the smaller but still non-linear areas in a very expansive galaxy, as opposed to sticking to just one big open world like every Bethesda game. Sticking to one big open world means that you're only gonna be constrained to that particular area, a problem that The Outer Worlds cleverly solve. The way they did this system reminds me so much of the older Fallout games. They technically have a very large open world, but they're separated with smaller but non-linear areas. But those areas wouldn't be worth exploring if they aren't a looker, and whoo boy, they are definitely a looker. This is one of the best looking games of this year. The environment is incredibly colorful and varying from places to places. Exploring these areas is a treat. Every planet offers different looks and different environments and interesting things to find around the area. It's a great looking game that might potentially tax your PC, but we'll talk about the port later on. What's less of a looker are the character models. This is an issue that has been brought up by many people around the web in that the game's character designs are just not that appealing, both for the male and the female. I don't like how a lot of the female characters' hair choices are short. Now, I do like myself some short-haired girls, but the option for short hairs are a bit excessive compared to the longer ones in my opinion, and this results in a lot of the game's female characters having short hairs, and looking like a stereotypical butch les. I can't say it because YouTube might demonetize me. I suppose living in a hostile post-apocalyptic universe makes sense for women to have short hairs. I mean, you don't want your hair to interfere with your activities too much. But then I get into the Byzantium area, which is basically the game's upper class sort of town, and even then they still have short hairs there. I do like the fact that your female characters can have beards for the alphabet people out there who can't make up their minds. They're just for a good laugh. There are also other minor aspects that I find to be a looker. The loading screen artworks are pretty nice to look at, one of which has a woman that actually looks feminine. Where is this woman in this game? Can I meet this woman, please? But just because the game looks great doesn't mean that the game plays great. So how is the gameplay of this game? Let's talk about the combat first. The combat was fine. It's not horrible, but it's not great either. The combat, in my opinion, is less Fallout and more Bioshock. And by Bioshock, I mean Bioshock Infinite Bioshock. The game necessitates you to carry weapons that apply different types of damage. Some enemies are pretty bullet spongy if you're trying to kill them with physical projectiles, which is why they have to be taken down through plasma or shock or just repeatedly hitting their weak points. What's worse is that these weapons and armors degrade rather quickly. You can fix them through the use of weapons or armor parts, which are unfortunately way too uncommon and they cost way too much to fix. But what is very common is your cash or bits, and thankfully you can repair your weapons in pretty much any vendors around town using your cash instead of weapon parts or armor parts. And thankfully making money in this game is very easy. All you need to do is just to grab extra weapons and armors that you get from enemies, mark them as junk, and hold Z to sell all the junk. I ended up making around 30,000 bits doing this method, which made it a lot easier thanks to bartering perks and the abundance of vending machines around the area. And yes, you can sell your junk in these vending machines too, but they cannot repair your weapons, unfortunately. And speaking of easy, I played this game on a normal difficulty, which is the recommended mode for your first play session. If this is the recommended difficulty, then prepare yourself for a breeze, because this game is a walk in a park. I barely have to waste a lot of the ammo that I have. I ended up having like thousands and thousands of them. I think that's because the game only has 3 ammo types: light, heavy, and energy. This streamlined approach actually makes me to get them a lot more than I needed. I could probably sell them for extra cash. I also ended up with like 120 plus healing items, which is way too excessive. So if you want something more challenging, maybe bump the game difficulty to hard, or if you're daring, try the supernova difficulty, which adds a lot of limitations to this game that will make the game a lot more challenging. Although I don't recommend it because the companions in that difficulty will suffer from permadeath, and even on the normal difficulty, they die very easily. In fact, I'd even dare to say that they die more times than they actually help me in combat. What's worse is that there's no way to revive them, at least early on. So if both of your companions got knocked out during combat, you're gonna have to deal with the rest of the enemies by yourself. But hey, at least they have their one-button special abilities that actually works. I harp on the combat quite a bit on this game, but truthfully, the combat can be fun. It's just that there are a lot of annoyances that prevent it from being enjoyable overall, like the bullet spongy enemies even on their weak points, or your companions that will die every single time, or your weapons that will break easily. Since the combat in this game is just okay, and that the combat takes a good portion of the game's overall gameplay, then it should definitely be put into consideration. Also, why is there no option to choose a centered crosshair? The game defaults to a slightly lower crosshair offset, and I prefer to have it perfectly centered, thank you. Give us the option on future patches at least. But what about the role-playing elements? What about the quests? Can Obsidian bring us that epic journey with their intriguing quests with multiple outcomes? Ladies and gentlemen, I am happy to report that yes, Obsidian can deliver. In fact, the quest design is the best aspect about this game. Once again, it follows the New Vegas formula in that the quests will have different outcomes, optional objectives, and certain completion routes depending on your methods. But unlike New Vegas, well, this game is a lot less morally gray. This game is very anti-corporate. Almost every single corporate figure that I encounter in this game is bad. Either morally bad or just incompetent bad. One of the major factions in the game, the Board, gives you a mission in which you have to massacre an entire freaking town. and that's one of the very first few missions. But to the game's credit, they do at least provide you the option to side with the bad guys, which is more than I can say for Fallout 3. At least they give you the freedom to be the corporate slave who obeys the will of the higher-ups and complain that certain video games aren't exclusive to a console anymore. I'm really impressed by the fact that you can finish a lot of the game's quests through many means. You can finish them through good old bloodbath and ruining your reputation, but you can also try to find a more diplomatic route that results in the benefits of both parties, well, actually the benefits of one party for most quests, but at least there are no bloods being shed. You can bribe a guard of a restricted government building to enter it, or you can find alternative routes in the sewers that bypass them. The game really takes notes from a lot of the good Western RPGs out there, and for that, I totally appreciate it. It offers a lot of freedom for the players to choose however they want to finish a mission and be whoever that they want to be. Overall, the gameplay parts of this game are good. The combat does need a lot of work and they can be rather easy and annoying at times, but the role-playing elements of this game are pretty freaking stellar. The quests are very well designed. They have multiple solutions to a problem. The world and the areas are interesting to explore around, filled with secrets and bonuses. They do make the overall experience worth it. But with that being said, I recommend you to refrain from just finishing the main quest and the main quest alone, because the game will be incredibly short otherwise. People reported that they finished the game in around 20 to 30 hours. I finished the game in around 15 hours. Yes, 15 hours. For an RPG, that's ridiculously short, and I finished quite a bit of side quests along the way. I thought maybe it's because I haven't explored the planets around the system, but some of the planets are straight up uninhabitable, so I have explored pretty much most of what the game has to offer, and the game is only around 15 hours long. And I didn't even skip dialogues like how I did in a lot of RPGs. I just played the game for what it is and let the characters talk. Maybe because I'm siding with Phineas and that siding with the board will offer more playtime, but if that's the case, that's ridiculous. They should at least have a good balance. So considering that this game is ridiculously short, what about the story content? What about the writing? If this game is less than 20 hours long, is the journey at least worth it? Well, it depends on which storyline you're talking about. The game still has that Bethesda problem in that you can get overwhelmed with so much side quests that your main story would end up being put on the sideline. Thankfully, the side quest stories are intriguing enough for you to forget the main story entirely, which we'll get to in a bit. But let's talk about the side quests for a moment. I particularly really love the companion side quests. Obsidian is really good at writing side quests for companions in New Vegas. In fact, New Vegas's companions are one of the best parts in the game. And the companions in this one is really good too. They all have intriguing backstories and motivations that shape their characters. Not only that, but their personality can be shaped by your decisions throughout the quests, so you're going to have a lot of headroom to get through. But the main quest storyline is nothing special, or at least the Phineas quest line. Not sure about the board quest line because they straight up tell me to annihilate an entire town, and I'm not that kind of bad guy, but the option is there in case you want to roleplay as a sociopath. Thankfully, just like in New Vegas, the game also has the epilogue slides that show the fate of the world. It's pretty cool, and I bet that there are gonna be multiple outcomes for those. But overall, the story is nothing to be impressed about. It's just fine at best and meh at worst. Now let's talk about the PC performance. While the game does look incredible on the environments, the characters look like they're from early PS3 titles, and even with that, there's a really noticeable texture popping in the character's armor every single time they have to switch to different portraits. I have no idea what's causing this. This game is already installed on my SSD. Should I install it on an NVMe drive instead? Because this texture popping is horrible. But aside from that, the game runs fine. On my GTX 1660 Ti laptop, it can achieve more than 60 FPS on high settings. Not interested in the very high settings, high is enough for me. There are a couple of really beautiful areas in the game that really stresses the GPU, even at this settings, but overall, it's a very pleasant experience. What's less pleasant, actually what's very insulting about this game's PC port, is that this Western RPG game for the PC has fewer options than a Japanese RPG game. We're living in a time where a JRPG has more graphical settings on the PC than a freaking Western RPG. Obsidian, what are you doing? So in conclusion, The Outer Worlds is just fine. It's not an amazing game, it's not a horrible game. For me, the game is just fine. The story is fine, the gameplay is fine, the role-playing elements are fine. It's a fine little RPG that is way too short for my liking, but at least the game provides a lot of options, replayability, and a good degree of freedom in the kinds of role that you want to play. At least it's a fun game to play, and that's more than I can say for a lot of AAA games these days. Now, considering that this is one of my most anticipated game of this year, surely I must have been disappointed that this game isn't as amazing as I expected. But I'm actually not. I'm rather pleased by this game because it's not necessarily a letdown. I expect this game to exceed whatever Bethesda is offering these days, and in a lot of ways, it does. The game is getting a lot of praise because it's being released at the time where the most that the Western market can offer for a post-apocalyptic role-playing game is Fallout 76. And that's not a good metric. The game is really good because Bethesda is really bad. The game is really good because BioWare is really bad. At this moment, we'll take anything that isn't Fallout 76 or Anthem. We'll take games like Remnants from the Ashes and Greedfall, which are also games that are just fine in my opinion. Not amazing, but not horrible either. The state of Western RPG is so bad these days that people will take whatever okay games that you can offer over anything that's just straight up trash. The Outer Worlds might not be an amazing and revolutionary game in and of itself, but putting it in the context of the time period that we're living in, it is refreshing to have a Western RPG that is made with actual passion and retains a lot of the good elements from well-known Western RPGs in the past, and is actually fun to play with a great degree of role-playing freedom. Should you buy The Outer Worlds? If you really love Fallout New Vegas, then you'd already have this game on your pre-order list. If not, then you would probably like this game, even if the game is really short. If you want a Fallout game that is not Fallout 76, this game is definitely for you. If you want an actually decent Western RPG game, this game is definitely for you. If you want an RPG with good-looking characters, stick to Code Vein. As for where you should buy this game, the game is available on a PS4, Xbox One, and PC. Avoid the console versions because their load times are atrocious. Get the PC version and install the game on an SSD. You can buy the game on Epic Game Store for $45, or you can buy it at the Windows Store for $60. Both prices are no deal for me. Make the game $20 to $25 and it's a deal. $30 and above is way too much for this game, and I don't recommend it at that price. You can also just rent the game with Xbox Game Pass, which at the time of this video can be had for just $1 a month. $1 just to play this game and hundreds of other games for just a month? That's an amazing deal if you ask me. But if you don't want to spend any money, then torrenting is perfectly fine too, I guess.